Today I will be showing how I was able to install a coolant bypass hose for a Cadillac Deville 1996. I replaced a couple things at this point for the vehicle, including leaking hoses, a coolant thermostat, water pump, and O-ring. The car was still overheating, so I had further investigation to do. The tools I used were a socket set, a Phillips and flathead screwdriver along with a vice grips, some coolant hoses, and a razor knife and scissors were needed, carburetor cleaner, and a wire hanger. At this point in the video, I had already removed the air filter housing and main air inlet hose. I will not be showing the removal. You can see this rubber hose runs off the coolant tank on the passenger side. Underneath the valve cover there is a metal hose that runs into, and then again reattaches into this hose, which then goes back to another metal hose. This metal hose here runs under the throttle body. This hose was completely clogged with whatever gunk from years of buildup of not being flushed properly. The coolant literally was being trapped in this pipe. I used a wire hanger, disassembled, to try to push some of this gunk through. That wasn't working, so I used some carburetor cleaner, hoping that it would break up some of the dirt to make it a little easier to unclog the pipe. You're supposed to be able to run the engine and have the pipe open while you do so, and the pipe should squirt out coolant. So I ran the engine after I sprayed the parts cleaner in the hole, and then I used my wire hanger again to try to let the force of the coolant push back through the hole. This did not work, so I decided to go another route. I had to remove the rest of the air inlet from the throttle body. There are 2 screws on top and 1 screw just below, and I used a socket set to remove those 3 screws. Now you can see that metal pipe is exposed. From the top over here is where it goes in, and then back down underneath and around here. The metal pipe is then secured to a rubber hose. I'll take my vice grip to pinch down on this clamp, and I'll remove the clamp off the hose so that I can remove the hose off the metal pipe. Once I remove this hose, I can see there's lots of old buildup of coolant and just gross stuff in there. This is because that metal hose was actually blocked up. So, since I found out that hose was so clogged, I want to go back through the whole system. So I'm going to take off the cover plate so I can have access to the metal hose that runs underneath. I want to see if that hose is clogged as well. I remove the clamp with my vice grips, and sometimes a screwdriver is helpful if you just put it right underneath the face of the hose where it meets the metal to kind of break the seal, because these hoses can be really old and hard to get off just by pulling alone. Luckily this one came off pretty easily, and on investigation of this pipe I can see there's already a lot of stuff in there, so I'm going to need to take this pipe out. Remove 2 bolts that secure it in. On this one there's only 1 bolt, and the clip that's holding the coolant hose to the tank on the passenger side. Once those are removed, you can unmount this metal hose and slide right through the wires for the spark plugs and out. This hose is completely corroded with nasty stuff in it. It's completely clogged with nasty stuff in there. Nothing's able to flow through there at that point. So that's one of the reasons why the coolant was getting so hot and the engine was overheating, is because this coolant wasn't able to go back into the tank after it had heated up to recycle back to the system. So I used some parts cleaner, used my wire hanger, try to push through some of this gunk, and then the water hose, and as you can see, there's a lot of old built up dirt and coolant and what have you coming out of the pipe. So after I ran my hose for a while and I used my wire hanger, I was able to get the pipe clear, and there we go. My goal is to reuse this pipe. If you can't get this pipe clear, if you try this bypass, you can always just run a rubber hose in place of where this pipe sits. Since I was able to clear it, I'm going to reuse it. I prefer to reuse all the parts if possible. So I'll sit this back in place, and I'll put the mounting bolts back on there. One there on the left and one there on the right. And now I'm going to take my hose and I'm going to use a bypass hose basically. I'm going to bypass this metal hose that comes underneath the throttle body, and I'm going to put my own rubber hose through that same run as close as possible to that metal pipe as I can. Once I get that hose ran, I'll attach the first side to the top. Use my metal clamp, screw that clamp down onto the rubber hose to hold onto the metal hose nice and tight. Now, I'm going to try to bring this tube as close to the original run as possible, but still I need enough slack so that this can run around without interrupting any of the pulleys or any of the things around it to overheat and possibly cause a leak in the future. So I want to give it a little extra room. Then I'm going to go ahead and attach the hose on the passenger side where the coolant tank is to complete this cycle. And now you have one clear line going all the way from the coolant hose under the cover down back through the bypass that we installed, the bypass, back in through where the thermostat sits. Since this has been installed, the car was run and driven for miles, has not overheated. This solved the issue in my case after replacing all those parts. If you want to give this a quick test, if you decide to do this, you can remove this pipe here, and you should, while the engine is running, have some coolant come out to show that the line is clear. Should actually squirt out a lot more than that. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.